This day will forever remain in my memory, and the feelings that I experienced will never leave me again. This is comparable to the fact that the earth has gone from under your feet, and there is a void. Darkness. The only thing immature about us was our behavior. The three adult men behaved like teenagers. It was a difficult situation. When your wife cheats on you, it's easy to get angry and want revenge. You need to have a lot of self-control. As long as the three of us were together, we could support each other. So whose wife was cheating? All of them. It happened over the course of 6 months. My wife Loretta got things started and had no trouble getting Dora and Colleen involved. By the time we figured out what was happening, it was too late to save any of the marriages. Not that any of us wanted to anyway. Everything comes to a head tonight. Surprisingly, none of the wives know we're onto them. We spent the past month preparing, and were actually excited to go through with it. Woody, Terry, and I grew up together. We were born and raised in Wummelsdorf and had always planned to retire here. But things changed when our wives strayed. Tomorrow we're heading off to a new life in Canada. Tonight we'll have one last immature hurrah. Why immature? Because what we're planning is childish and inappropriate. We preferred that over something violent and vindictive. It was Terry's idea to move to Canada. Every summer the three of us would take fishing trips up there and always had a great time. We often talked about how amazing it would be to live there permanently. But of course we all had families, wives and kids. My 2 daughters were married and out of the house, while Terry had a son in the Air Force. Woody had 2 sons in college and a 17-year-old daughter, Caitlin, still at home. Caitlin might have been an issue, but Woody found out she knew about her mother's behavior and threatened to leave if he didn't take action. In the end, it was 3 guys moving to Canada, with 1 strong-willed teenage girl. It was complicated for a while, but we all agreed we could still make it work. Terry was a chef, or rather a cook. He didn't have formal training, just plenty of experience. He and his wife, Dora, had owned a small family restaurant for the last decade. Well, they did, until Terry sold it last week without Dora knowing. I'm not sure how he pulled it off, but he walked away with $100,000 in cash. When he added that to the money he withdrew from the bank and cashed out insurance policies, we had a nice little starting fund. Woody co-owned an auto repair shop with his brother Glenn, who had been trying to buy him out for years. So selling his share was another easy $100,000 for the relocation fund. He also got nearly half that amount by selling his 1964 Corvette. Today, he cleaned out his bank accounts too. I was the only one who went to college. I didn't own a business like the other guys, but I had over $250,000 in investments. I worked as an electrical engineer and invested wisely. Even in a bad market, I managed to do well. It took a few weeks to liquidate everything, but now it's all done. Altogether, we had close to $1 million. Our initial plan was to get a fly-in fishing lodge, but somewhere along the way we softened our approach and settled for one that our guests could drive to. It ended up costing us nearly $500,000, but we were satisfied. We had enough money left to get started and support ourselves for at least 4 years. If we managed to turn a profit, things would be even better. We were packed and ready to go. The next morning, our 3-car caravan would set off for a new life in the North Woods. It felt about as thrilling as Little House on the Prairie. Loretta worked in the claims department of one of the major insurance companies in the area. Somehow she grew close to her boss, Raymond Upright. To meet up with him in the evenings, she convinced Dora and Colleen to cover for her. The girls would go out together for dinner and drinks, or attend a home party, giving Loretta the opportunity to see Raymond at his house. This went on for a couple of months, and then Raymond set up a date for Colleen. Not wanting Dora to feel left out, the girls arranged for her to have a steady companion a few weeks later as well. As things stand, every Wednesday night the women go out for a bachelorette party while the men play poker. Meanwhile, the three women and their partners indulged in stormy meetings at Raymond's country house. We never found out if there was any kind of partner swap, but it didn't seem to matter much. Woody chose the Holiday Inn as our meeting place. We stayed at home until the wives left for their party. Interestingly, each of them traveled separately, perhaps in case someone wanted to leave early or stay later. Caitlin wasn't thrilled to have to wait for us at the motel, but we couldn't risk taking her with us. We hadn't planned anything particularly complicated, but there was still a chance that we might get into trouble. Woody and Terry were heading straight to the Holiday Inn, so they rented a car. On the other hand, I wanted to see Loretta one last time before I left, so I drove my car. 6 cars were parked outside the upright home, indicating that everyone had driven themselves. About 30 minutes after our arrival, a light in one of the bedrooms turned on and then quickly went off. Shortly after that, the same thing occurred in the other 2 bedrooms. Each of us had a pair of side-cutting pliers, and it took less than 2 minutes to cut the valve stems on all the cars. I had scouted the house the week prior, so I knew exactly where the electrical service box was located. The individual breakers were inside, while the main panel was outside, just above the meter. As I approached the house, Terry and Woody prepared the smoke flares. Terry had constructed 10 smoke flares using PVC pipe, and I only knew that they contained saltpeter and sugar. After testing them, Terry discovered they would burn for about 20 to 30 minutes. They were quite large. Woody headed to the back of the house, while Terry went to the front. When I noticed the first trace of white smoke, I flipped the main power switch. Using my mini flashlight, I opened the panel and removed the main breaker. By the time I reached the car, all 10 smoke flares were going off at full force. Most of them were white, but a few were orange and red. As we drove away, the house was completely shrouded in smoke. On the way home, I used the track phone to call 2 local TV stations. About an hour later, I heard a car door shut outside. Loretta looked awful as she walked into the house. I was sitting in front of the muted TV with a beer that had gone warm since I'd been holding it for the past 30 minutes. "How was your evening, darling?" She dropped her purse and kicked off her shoes. "I had to take a cab home. The car has a flat. Why didn't you call me?" She didn't respond. "Do you want me to go get the car for you?" "No, I'll handle it in the morning. I'm exhausted. I need a shower and just want to go to bed." "Loretta, where are your earrings? You were wearing the diamond studs when you left." Her hand instinctively went to her ear, and her mouth fell open a bit. I expected her to say they were in her purse, but she stayed silent. "Let me guess. You took them off so you wouldn't lose them in bed. Since you left your purse in the living room, you must have placed the earrings on the nightstand. When the lights went out, you were in such a hurry to leave that you forgot them. Does that sound right?" She gave me a puzzled look. "How did you know the lights went out?" I held up the main breaker I had removed from the panel. "Oh, God, no! You were there? Please, John, don't tell me you were there." I smiled as I stood up from the chair. I wasn't alone. Terry and Woody were with me. By morning, we'll be gone. We bought a shrimp boat down in Bayou La Batre, Alabama. I hope you and Raymond find happiness together. John, wait, don't leave. John, can we talk? John? I slammed the door behind me and headed to the car. On the way to the motel, I drove past the upright house. There were a couple of police cars and 4 tow trucks working to get the vehicles out of there. I parked down the street and walked straight into the garage. No one tried to stop me. The house was dark and empty. With my mini flashlight, I checked the bedrooms. In the second one, I found a pair of diamond earrings and both of Loretta's wedding rings. It struck me as interesting that she had taken off her rings before committing adultery. 10 minutes later, I arrived at the Holiday Inn. Loretta had called the other wives, and they were frantically trying to patch things up. According to Terry, Dora was crying so uncontrollably that he couldn't understand a word she said. He turned off his phone. Colleen, however, wasn't as emotional. She simply demanded that Woody come home right away and explain himself. He turned off his phone, too. We had a room reserved with 2 double beds. Caitlin wasn't thrilled about sharing a room with 3 guys, but since she joined last minute, she had to deal with it. We slept in our clothes and hit the road by 5 a.m. the next morning. We had a reservation for the following night in Plattsburgh, and Woody assured Caitlin she'd have her own room then. We had been driving for about 5 hours when my phone rang. I had forgotten to turn it off. The caller ID showed it was my eldest daughter, Sarah. "Dad, it's Sarah. What's going on between you and Mom?" "Is she there?" "Yes, and she's a mess. She said you won't let her explain anything." "Did she explain it to you?" "No, she just says you're being unreasonable and unfair. That's all I've gotten from her." "Sarah, do me a favor. Look and see if your mother is wearing her wedding rings." There was a brief pause. "No, she's not. What does that mean?" "Ask her where her rings are." I heard some muffled sounds, and then Sarah came back. "Dad, what the hell is going on?" I asked about her rings, and she started crying and ran out of the house. She drove off, but I didn't recognize the car. "When your mother's ready to explain what happened, I'll talk to you. Until then, I have nothing more to say. I'll stop by the house later to check on her." I turned off my phone. I didn't need more stress. By noon today, all of the wives will be served with divorce papers. Raymond Upright will also be served with alienation of affection papers, as will Carl Wilcox and Dennis Roswell. Our shared attorney, Seymour Schlamp, who went to school with us, promised to keep us updated as long as he can reach us. Seymour was proud to help in our efforts, not so much for revenge, but as a way to free ourselves from the problem. 2 days later, we had settled into our new home. Hopefully, our wives thought we were headed to Alabama. It would make things easier if no one came looking for us. Terry was thrilled with the kitchen, his new domain. The lodge had closed for 2 weeks so we could get acquainted with the place. A few of the old staff stayed on to help us during that time. Woody was swamped, juggling boat maintenance and keeping the lodge generators running, leaving him with little free time. Caitlin agreed to handle waiting tables and housekeeping, but since she wasn't a co-owner, she wanted to be paid. And how could we refuse? By the time our first guest arrived, everything was ready. Terry had his menu planned and supplies stocked. Woody had all the boat engines tuned up. The overall management of the lodge fell on my shoulders, a challenge I welcomed. Local fishing guides were eagerly waiting for guests, with their pay dependent on how successful the trips were. That was one thing we didn't need to worry about. In my spare time, I worked on improving the lodge's website. The better the site, the easier it would be to keep the rooms booked. Terry, Woody, and I were all fishermen, but come fall we'd need to figure out how to cater to hunters or other guests. For now, we didn't have a plan and decided to deal with it when the time came. The lodge was running smoothly, but things at home weren't. Seymour called to update us. Dora was the only wife who had signed and returned the divorce papers. She didn't want the divorce, but felt obligated to do whatever Terry asked. However, she had become a recluse, barely leaving the house, and refusing to talk to anyone. Colleen had vanished, along with Dennis Roswell. Seymour hadn't been able to serve them with papers, and no one knew where they were. Seymour saved the worst news for last. Loretta refused to sign the divorce papers, and Raymond Upright had moved into the house with her, our house. So much for the remorseful wife. For the next few days, I was pretty useless around the lodge. Eventually, Woody and Terry sat me down and told me I needed to go home and sort things out. I didn't wait until morning. I woke up in the middle of the night and started driving south. It wasn't fair to the guys if I wasn't pulling my weight. I had to make things right. Of course, I didn't make it all the way. I'm not one for long drives. Halfway through, I stopped, rented a small room, and called Seymour. I told him to sue Continental Paragon Insurance for $1 million, but with a catch. If they fired both Loretta and Raymond, I'd drop the suit. Seymour wasn't thrilled, because he knew what they'd choose and saw the big payday slipping away. I told him to charge me for the hours and serve the papers at noon the next day. I hit the road early, and by 8 I was parked out of sight, across from the house. 10 minutes later, the garage door opened, and Loretta and Raymond left for work, together. They looked comfortable, which made me mad. Time for more childish antics. I went to Kroger's and picked up 6 cans of red beets and some rubber gloves. By then, my favorite Asian market was open. I bought 5 pounds of stinky tofu, and from the frozen section, I grabbed 5 bags of some smelly, skinny fish we used as bait. I don't know their real name. We just called them skinny fish. Finally, I bought 2 durian fruits. Durian is known as the worst-smelling fruit in the world. I was sure I'd figure out a way to use it. Half an hour later, I was back at my old house. I estimated I had around 3 hours to complete what needed to be done. My first task was to deal with the thin fish before they started to thaw. All I needed was a simple screwdriver. I moved from room to room, removing the covers from each electrical switch and wall socket. I dropped 2 of the fish into the wall behind each fixture. It took about 10 minutes per room, and after an hour and a half I ran out of fish. The sticky tofu was soft and mushy, spreading easily like butter. I applied it to the top and bottom of the mattresses and to all the furniture cushions. The smell would seep into the fabric and become impossible to get rid of. Next, I had to use the kitchen cleaver to chop up the durian fruit. The stench was awful, like something rotten. I tucked a piece deep inside each of the heating and air conditioning ducts throughout the house. I walked around to inspect everything. I had carefully reattached all the electrical fixtures, ensuring no one could figure out the source of the smell. Pleased with my work, I drizzled beet juice over every carpet in the house. No stain remover could get rid of that. With the inside of the house finished, I headed to the garage and opened the breaker panel. I removed each breaker and then the main one. Using my trusty screwdriver, I disconnected everything. It was an electrician's nightmare, especially since I took the panel and breakers with me. My job here was complete. They could keep the house now. In 30 minutes, all hell would break loose at Continental Paragon. It was time for me to leave. For some reason, I felt the need to look in on Dora. She invited me into the house and offered me coffee, which I had to agree to. She asked how Terry was doing, but didn't say anything else. We sat in silence until I finished my coffee. I asked if there was anything I could do for her, and suddenly she burst into tears and left the room. As I headed for the door, she called out to me, "John, please tell him for me. You have to tell him from me." "Tell him what?" She came back, still crying, and I struggled to understand her. "I didn't sleep with him, John. Please tell Terry that I didn't sleep with Carl. I've been doing other things, but I haven't slept with him." "What do you mean by other things?" You know, he kept pushing me. I had to do something to make him stop. I didn't even want to be there. Colleen and Loretta made me go. They thought that if I went, I wouldn't say anything. I felt cornered. I just stood there, not knowing what to say. Please, John, tell Terry I didn't sleep with him. I love Terry, and I'm sorry that I let Colleen and Loretta convince me to leave. I do not know what to do. Help me, John. I left feeling even worse than when I arrived. She sincerely regretted what she had done, but had no idea how to fix it. Before heading back to the lodge, I made a stop to check in on Sarah. She wasn't speaking to her mother anymore. Loretta never told her what had happened, but Sarah found out somehow. When she confronted her mother, it turned into a heated argument that hadn't been resolved yet. More drama. I was just outside Plattsburgh when my phone rang. It was Loretta. Sarah must have given her my number. John, you bastard, what the hell did you do? Could you be a little more specific? I got fired today. They said it was either me or a lawsuit. Your name came up. That's unfortunate, darling. I was really hoping they'd just pay me the $1 million. Looks like we both lost out. I couldn't help but stifle a laugh. That's not all. When I got home, the place was trashed. No power and it reeked. What did you do to my house? It's not just your house, Loretta. You wouldn't sign the divorce papers, remember? It's our house. I can do whatever I want with it. I called the police. You're going to have to fix it and deal with the charges. Why don't you just get Raymond to fix it? He seems to be handling things better than I ever did. He'd love to talk to you about that, John, especially since you got him fired too. Tell you what, Loretta, next time I'm in town, I'll give him a call. The conversation was becoming tiresome. I was happy everything was falling into place, but I really didn't want to keep talking to her. I hung up without even bothering to say goodbye and switched off the phone. I hoped to be back at the lodge in time for breakfast. Everything seemed to be running smoothly while I was gone, aside from a minor issue. Caitlin, where the hell is your father? Hey, John, welcome back. Dad's just gone for a couple of days. He had some business in Vegas to sort out. Yeah, he had to take a bit of the working cash for the trip. He told me to tell you not to worry. How much cash is he asking for? 10,000. Why on earth does he need 10 grand? I'm not sure, but I think it might be connected to Mom. Oh no. Where's Terry? In the kitchen getting lunch ready. Aside from the fact that one of the partners took off with a large portion of our working capital, everything seemed to be running smoothly. Terry was busy but had everything under control. He figured out it was easier to set up a small buffet each day instead of letting guests order from the menu. It was working well, and there were no complaints from the guests. John, good to see you. How was the trip? It was great, actually. I'm really glad I went. I'm guessing you've heard that Woody's gone? Caitlin gave me a brief update, but she didn't have many details. Colleen's in some serious trouble. She called Seymour, asking him to get in touch with Woody. Apparently Dennis bailed on her after racking up a hefty bill at the MGM Grand. The hotel had her arrested for defrauding an innkeeper. The bill is just shy of $10,000. They're holding her in the local jail until it's paid off, and if nothing's done soon, she's facing some jail time. Are you really saying that Woody is going to use our money to pay for Colleen and her boyfriend's hotel bill? I don't think so. He was smiling when he left. He might have something planned. I really hope so. We might need that money for winter. He got a round-trip ticket and should be back this evening. I was about to walk away when I remembered my visit with Dora. Terry, I saw Dora while I was home. She's not doing well. Tough luck. After what they did to us, I have no sympathy for her or the others. I'm not sure, basically, but I think Dora's situation might be different. Different? How so? A cheater is a cheater. It can't be changed. Loretta and Colleen may have pressured her into going along with them. I don't think she wanted to, but she felt forced. Is that what she told you? Not really, but she wanted me to make sure you knew she hadn't slept with him. Then what the hell was she doing there? I didn't answer. There was a short silence before he began to put it all together. Oh no, just don't tell me. She didn't sleep with him, but she did something else. Fantastic. It's just fantastic. She said she felt like she was being pressured into doing something. She insisted that I tell you that she had no intimacy with him. Obviously, Loretta and Colleen were really pushing her. I could see that Terry was upset. I'm sorry, John, but for me it's as bad as sleeping with someone. She shouldn't have been there at all. I left him to think. I thought I understood what was going on in his head, but to be honest, I didn't know how I would have handled such a situation myself. It only took me a few hours to finish the day's work. I had to figure out how we could make money in the winter. We prepared for the fishing season, but we needed additional income. It was impossible to compete with hunting camps, and we all agreed to avoid anything related to snowmobiling. My research was interrupted by a new guest. Amanda Freese was an unforgettable woman. I knew that phrase was a cliché, and I chided myself for even considering it. In her mid-40s, she had short, dark hair and a constant, sun-kissed glow. While she wasn't conventionally beautiful, her posture and demeanor more than made up for it. I assume you're the new owner? She inquired. One of them. How can I assist you? I replied. I can manage just fine on my own. I'm Amanda Freese. I've been coming here regularly for the past few years, and hope to continue that. I trust you haven't made too many changes, as I'm not a fan of change. If there are any changes that don't suit you, just let me know. I will. I promise. I sensed she was trying to provoke me a bit, though I was uncertain of her motives. It was my duty to keep her satisfied, but I had no plans to let her walk all over me. Luc Boudreau has been my regular guide. I trust he's still available? She asked. Absolutely. I'm going to spend the rest of the day getting settled in. Can you ensure Luc is here tomorrow morning? Not a problem, Mrs. Freese. Luc Boudreau was more than willing to share his thoughts on Amanda Freese. For some reason, she seemed to take a liking to him. He was neither better nor worse than the other guides, but he wouldn't let her push him around. According to him, she appeared to appreciate that. Her sole interest was pike fishing, which was peculiar since she was from Burlington, where there were plenty of pike in Lake Champlain. There was no reason for her to travel to our location. Luc wasn't certain, but he suspected she was divorced. She had a son who only joined her on one trip. He disliked being on the lake, so she never brought him along again. Amanda was a generous tipper and seemed to be Luc's favorite guest. Pike fishing was an unusual choice for a woman, as it wasn't particularly thrilling. Catching a pike felt almost like snagging a log. She never kept any of the fish. It was all catch and release. There was something intriguing about her, and I was looking forward to her visit. At some point, in the middle of the night, Woody returned. When I came downstairs, he was halfway through breakfast and appeared happy to see me. Give me the bad news, Woody. How much did your Vegas trip cost us? Woody chuckled quietly while Caitlin poured me a cup of coffee. Not a dime, my friend. Not a single dime. You seem surprisingly cheerful. I didn't expect that. I paid for my own ticket, John. Round-trip fares to Las Vegas are pretty affordable. I brought a stack of cash to show off to Colleen. It worked like a charm. What worked? Woody had finished his meal and pushed his plate away. They were keeping Colleen until she could pay the hotel bill she and that jerk racked up. He bailed on her, and she didn't even realize what was happening. She had to pay back $9,700 plus court fees to be released. I flashed her the cash and promised to cover everything as soon as she signed the divorce papers. I've never seen anyone move so quickly. I thought you said it didn't cost us anything? John, I'm not that naive. I took the signed documents and walked straight out of the courthouse. I'm sure it took her several hours to figure out that I had tricked her just like Dennis did. I mailed the signed papers to Seymour and caught the next flight back to Montreal. You're a terrible person, Woody. Yeah, I know, and it feels great. When Caitlin came by to refill the coffee, I asked her if she could bring me some breakfast. She mentioned it would take a bit longer since Terry was away. What on earth was happening? Caitlin was much better at cooking than I was, so I helped by waiting tables to allow her to focus on preparing the food. Fortunately, the breakfast crowd trickled in over several hours. I tidied up the kitchen while Caitlin handled the cleaning tasks. The lunch buffet went a bit more smoothly. Being a busboy was definitely easier than being a waiter. Caitlin did an excellent job again with the meal, but it was clear we needed more assistance. After lunch, Luc Boudreau was waiting in my office for me. That wasn't a good sign. I didn't want to lose him as a mentor. Mr. Mercer, I just need a moment of your time. Is something wrong, Luc? If there is, I'll do whatever I can to resolve it. Nothing's wrong, but I'm worried about Miss Amanda. Worried in what way? She's been asking a lot of questions which she never does. She's getting frustrated with me because I can't answer most of them. I don't want her to be upset with me. What kind of questions? Mainly about you, why you bought the lodge, where you came from, and about your wife. I can't answer any of those. She never asked you those things before? Not at all. She barely spoke to me before, except about the pike. Anything else? She was also inquiring a lot about the young woman who does the housekeeping. Caitlin? Why would she be asking about her? Luc just shrugged. He seemed uneasy about the whole situation, so I thanked him and he quickly left, appearing relieved after our conversation. Woody handled dinner by setting up grills on the front porch, allowing all the guests to cook their own steaks. The weather was cool and pleasant, and everyone seemed to enjoy themselves, even Amanda Freese. We accompanied the meal with beans, coleslaw, and garlic toast, which were easy to prepare. While Woody and Caitlin were cleaning up, I noticed Amanda Freese sitting by the fireplace with a glass of red wine. It wasn't quite cold enough for a substantial fire, but the small one looked inviting. May I join you? She didn't respond verbally, but moved over on the couch to make space. That was a positive sign, even though I wasn't sure what to say next. Did Luc come to see you? She seemed to anticipate my question. Did you suggest that to him? Not exactly, but I did drop a few hints, so to speak. You lured him in? Sort of. It became clear that Luc didn't know any more about you and your team than I did. I felt it would be awkward to approach you directly, so I was hoping he could pique your interest enough to come to me. You're quite the scheming woman. Is there a reason behind your madness? She finished her wine and chuckled a bit. I reached out for the empty glass, which she handed to me without hesitation. A few moments later, I returned with the bottle and 2 glasses. Now that you're feeling more at ease, do you have any questions you'd like me to answer? Yes, a few. How about this? For every question you ask me, I get to ask you one in return. That seems unfair. I have a right to my privacy, while you don't. Would you prefer to just sit back, enjoy the wine, and watch the fire? No, I want some answers. You're quite the debater. Indeed I am. Are you married? That's not fair. You slipped a question in while I wasn't paying attention. I'm not sure if it was the wine or the playful conversation, but we both started to feel more relaxed. I am married, or rather, I was. I'm currently going through a divorce. She nodded in response and took a sip of her wine. My turn. Are you divorced? You phrased that question the wrong way. Yes, I know. I tend to be an optimist. I've been divorced for 9 years, and I have an 18-year-old son. I have 2 daughters. They're married and moved out. I didn't ask. I anticipated. The conversation felt unusual and went on for over an hour. I ended up opening another bottle of wine before we wrapped up. Amanda eventually excused herself, mentioning that Luke expected her at 6 a.m., and she proudly declared that she was never late. I was looking forward to spending more time with her. The following morning brought a few unexpected surprises. Woody and I came downstairs for breakfast together, and were surprised to find that our new waitress was none other than Dora. We exchanged smiles as we greeted her with a good morning. Neither of us made any sarcastic remarks, doing our best to act as if everything was normal. At one point I noticed Dora looking at me, and she silently mouthed, "Thank you." I simply nodded in response. Later that morning, Seymour called. Loretta had agreed to sign the divorce papers with one condition. She wanted to be completely free of any liability related to the house, which I would take over as sole owner. The house was in disrepair, but it still had a solid structure. I told him to proceed. Even though I was 600 miles away, I felt confident I could come up with a plan. It was gratifying to see some positive outcomes from what had started as a childish prank. What surprised me most was that she wasn't trying to claim any of the assets we had accumulated. Although she was only aware of about half of them, it was strange that she was willing to walk away without demanding anything. Terry popped into the office and gave me a wink, but nothing more. He was a better man than I was, and I genuinely felt happy for him. Amanda Freese took the afternoon off from fishing and was in the main lodge area with Caitlin. I peeked in at them a few times to gauge what was happening. Caitlin seemed a bit irritated with Amanda at times, suggesting they were disagreeing about something, but she didn't walk away. I struggled to focus for the rest of the afternoon. I really wanted to speak with Terry to find out what had happened to bring him back together with Dora. I hoped to have a brief conversation with Luke to see if the enigmatic Mrs. Freese had mentioned anything during their morning fishing trip. I was also curious about what was happening between Amanda and Caitlin. I felt an urge to call Loretta, just to let her vent a bit and quietly revel in the situation. I was convinced that Dora wanted to talk to me, albeit discreetly. I couldn't believe I was becoming such a nosy person. Suddenly I found myself laughing at the absurdity of it all. Woody came by with a couple of cold beers, breaking the spell. Terry was complaining because we had used all the steaks, ruining his menu for the week. That beer tasted fantastic. Woody and I agreed not to ask Terry about his situation with Dora. When he was ready to share, he would. Shortly after Woody left, Luke stopped by to inform me that Mrs. Freese had been in a great mood that morning. Although she didn't catch many fish, she didn't seem bothered by it. He left me with a smile and a wink, and I wasn't sure what that meant. Amanda Freese always ate alone during mealtimes. I usually tried to avoid casual interactions with the guests, but tonight I decided to approach the enigmatic woman. Well, she wasn't really a mystery anymore, just intriguing. Mind if I join you? Not at all. I haven't placed my order yet. You didn't go out this afternoon, did you? Number I wanted to speak with Caitlin. I should have asked her father for permission first, but I was hoping to keep it informal. How did that turn out for you? Not very well, I'm afraid. I couldn't explain things as clearly as I wanted. I just hope I didn't mess it up too badly. Dora interrupted us to take our dinner orders. We chose one of 3 main courses, and the rest of the meal was set. Terry knew how to keep things straightforward. What exactly were you trying to accomplish? I mentioned last night that I have a son. You did, but you didn't go into detail. Jason is very intelligent, good-looking and in good health, but he has one significant issue. He has been emotionally abused by his father since he was a baby. Even though he has always excelled at everything he tried, his father was never satisfied. The constant criticism and belittling have stripped him of his self-esteem and confidence. He stutters and avoids interactions with others, whether they are adults or peers. I take it that was what led to the divorce? Absolutely. I also have a restraining order that prevents his father from contacting him even now that he's of legal age. I have competent lawyers. The conversation paused briefly while Dora served our meals. Luke mentioned that Jason came here to the lodge with you once. That's correct. I thought it might help him unwind, but he hated the lake and despised fishing. Since then, he stayed with my sister when I visit. Do you feel guilty about leaving him by himself? Yes, but I believe it's necessary. I don't want him to rely on me. At some point, he'll need to be independent. I try to extend my absences each time to help him adjust. Unfortunately, leaving him with my sister isn't proving very effective. I think I understand, but why Caitlin? She's the same age as Jason. She seems confident and composed. She works hard, but beyond that, I don't know much about her. She's attractive, and people seem to feel at ease around her. What were you hoping she would do for you, or more specifically, for Jason? I just wanted her to spend some quality time with him. I was hoping I could bring him here for a few weeks, and maybe he would start to open up. He's set to begin at Princeton in 6 weeks, but in his current state, he won't be able to go. I've spent thousands on professional therapists, and it's all been for nothing. That might be asking too much in just 2 weeks. I have to try something. I noticed Caitlin didn't seem very receptive. She said she would think about it, but I'm afraid it doesn't look very hopeful. Would you like to speak with Woody? I was hoping you could do that for me. Why me? I'm a good judge of character. Unfortunately, I let my father choose my husband for me, and I won't make that mistake again. I'll see what I can do. Are you having dessert? I will, if you join me. I spotted Caitlin and Woody on the porch. It was a bit chilly, but quite lovely. Mind if I interrupt? Not at all. Caitlin and I were actually waiting for you to come out. How was your dinner? It was interesting. Your lovely daughter was the topic of our conversation. That's what we were hoping for. Uncle John, she really frustrated me. I can't tell if she wants me to be a babysitter or something else. I wasn't her real uncle, but she had started calling me that years ago, and it just stuck. There's a significant difference between those two roles. Well, I'm not particularly keen on either option. Did she present it that way, or is that just your interpretation? Caitlin took a moment before responding. No, I just figured that's what she meant. Regardless, I have no desire to spend my time with someone who's not all there. Whoa, that's a poor choice of words. Woody looked a bit irritated by his daughter's insensitivity. I don't know how else to put it. Mrs. Freese tried to explain his situation, but I didn't really pay attention. My mind was all over the place. Caitlin, he's starting at Princeton in a couple of months. He's not stupid or incapable. In fact, from what I understand, he's quite intelligent. Woody and I watched as his daughter paced back and forth on the porch. No, it still doesn't sit right with me. She's offering me money to take care of her son. I'm not a babysitter, and I'm definitely not. She hesitated mid-sentence. I'm not an escort. You shouldn't have to pay someone to spend time with another person like that. I smiled at her audacity. I have a simple solution. Why don't you tell her that you'll do whatever she wants for free? That way your reputation will remain unblemished. What kind of reputation? I don't care what other people think. I have to accept it. Woody laughed softly at his daughter's attempts to act like an adult. What she was saying made sense, but it was too long. How can I do my job and watch him at the same time? Dora can take over all your kitchen and dining room duties, and Jason will help you with the housework in the morning. It frees up the afternoon. Then what should I do with it? Running through the woods and doing adult things. Woody tried, but couldn't keep a straight face. It was a stupid way to tease his own daughter, but she was ready for it, and he just couldn't resist. Damn it, Dad. Stop it. This is serious, and you and John are turning everything into some kind of joke. Caitlin plopped down on the bench between us. All right, I'll do it, but only for 2 weeks. Woody hugged her. I'm not quite sure why, but I think he felt proud of her decision. We all stood up and headed back to the lodge. Dad, why can't I go to Princeton? Woody just groaned and gave her a playful smack on the backside. Later that evening, Amanda and I enjoyed coffee by the fireplace. She seemed pleased with how things were going, and decided to extend her stay at the lodge so she could be there at the same time as her son. When I expressed my disapproval of her plan, she looked a bit upset. However, we managed to reach a compromise. I promised to keep her entertained if she agreed to leave Caitlin and Jason alone. She found the idea amusing and asked what I had in mind. I still hadn't had the chance to discuss with Terry or Sarah why she was at the lodge. I could wait until they were ready to talk. After I went to bed, sleep eluded me as one thought kept replaying in my mind. Why hadn't Loretta tried to access any of the money in the bank? Why was she so eager to settle? What was it that I didn't know? When I came down for breakfast, Amanda was already on the water. Woody and I had blueberry pancakes but didn't waste time on light conversation. He had 2 outboards to overhaul, and I had bills to take care of. I decided to call Seymour later in the morning. I had that annoying itch that needed to be scratched. John, I shared the same concern as you, but I didn't want to complicate things further. I thought getting Loretta to sign the papers was the priority. However, I did assign one of my girls to look into the matter. Was it a problem, or something else entirely? Do you remember when Loretta's father passed away? Yeah, it was about 6 years ago. It was tragic. She lost both her parents within 2 years. Loretta's father had a life insurance policy worth $100,000. Did you know that? She never mentioned that at all. Loretta deposited the insurance payout into a money market account at the Berkshire Credit Union under her maiden name. You must be joking. Why on earth would she do that? John, we may never know unless she chooses to tell you. I think she didn't want to risk losing her insurance money by claiming any of your joint assets. Ray Upright didn't even come to town until last year, so he had nothing to do with it. That's true, but it brings up another intriguing point. Mr. Upright has a wife and 2 children in Colorado Springs. From what we can tell, Loretta was unaware of this. I couldn't stop myself from laughing over the phone. I'm sorry, Seymour, but that's hilarious. She gave up everything for a man who was married and she didn't even know? Yeah, That's how it looks, and it gets worse. How could it possibly be worse? She cashed out the money market account yesterday and took off with a cashier's check for $124,000. Sounds like she's getting ready to skip town. All we can do now is wait and see. At least you're in the clear. I hung up and sat there quietly chuckling to myself when Dora walked in. John, I just wanted to thank you for talking to Terry. I really appreciate it. She was staring at the floor as she spoke. Is everything okay? Mostly. It's not the same as before, but it's a lot better than it could have been. Dora, I think he really loves you. I'm glad things are improving. There was a brief pause before she looked up. Things are better, John, but not back to normal. Maybe soon, but not yet. I can wait. What do you mean? Her eyes began to well up, and I realized I hadn't meant to upset her, so I decided to drop the subject. She started to leave, but then stopped. He won't kiss me, John. My husband refuses to kiss me. We do everything else, but he can't bring himself to touch my lips. I feel like a girl of easy virtue. It hurts, but I guess I deserve it. She was quietly crying as she left my office. I didn't know what to say. Jason Freese arrived shortly after lunch. He was good-looking and carried himself well. You'd never guess he was as socially awkward as his mother had described. Caitlin noticed him the moment he walked into the lodge, and her face lit up with a big grin. I don't think he was what she'd expected. The next 2 weeks were going to be interesting. Amanda persuaded me to go fishing with her several times. I didn't mind going for perch or walleye, but pike fishing bored me. Part of the reason was that I couldn't tell the difference between a fish bite and snagging on weeds. Luke found it hilarious, though he tried his best to keep a straight face. Eventually, Amanda stopped insisting I go fishing with her, as long as I agreed to join her on some afternoon nature walks. Terry and Woody were satisfied with how things were going. The three of us often met to discuss business matters. Terry never brought up his relationship with Dora, and Woody and I, out of courtesy, didn't either. Naturally, we were all keeping an eye on Caitlin and Jason. Things started slowly, but picked up after the second day. Woody and I finally cornered Caitlin and made her spill what was happening. I don't think the problem is as bad as Mrs. Freese makes it out to be. Why is that? He's just really shy, mostly because of his stutter. He can't speak normally at all, so he avoids people as much as he can, especially girls. I think he must have been teased a lot when he was younger. He seems comfortable around you. Not at first, Dad. It's getting better now, but I think it might take more than 2 weeks. Woody chuckled. You mean you want it to take longer than 2 weeks? I didn't say that. Don't make things up. John, I think my daughter's got herself a boyfriend. What should I do about that? We might need a chaperone. It was a weak attempt at teasing, but she reacted. You guys stop it. He's only going to be here for a few weeks, and then I'll probably never see him again. He's a nice guy, and I don't see what the big deal is. Does he have a girlfriend? Uncle John, that doesn't matter, but no, he doesn't. I don't think he's ever been on a date. Between his father breaking him down mentally and his mother overprotecting him, he hasn't had a chance. Have you kissed him yet? No, Dad, I haven't kissed him, and I don't plan to. Can you two drop it? We're doing fine. Stop trying to mess things up. With that, she gave us a brief lecture and stomped out of the room. Woody and I exchanged a knowing smile. Amanda and I had dinner together that evening, and she seemed happy with how Caitlin and Jason were getting along. I think she realized that part of Jason's issues stemmed from her playing the overprotective mother role. It was nice to see her preparing to let him become more independent. She also teased me about not keeping up my end of our agreement. I'd promised to keep her entertained, and she felt I wasn't doing enough to fulfill that commitment. Things at the lodge were going smoothly. The guests were satisfied, and we were actually making a profit. It wasn't much, but it was still progress. We had made contact with several ice hut operators in the area who were eager to set up as many units by the lake near the lodge as we could manage. Though we could only run it for about 10 weeks, it would help fill an otherwise slow period. Several birding organizations were also active in the region, offering another opportunity to attract visitors during the slower months in spring. With enough of our own land and nearby public areas, we could create several birding trails. Since we didn't want guests wandering the woods during hunting season, we decided autumn would be the best time for maintenance and upkeep of the entire facility. I was spending every evening with Amanda, and it was becoming natural and comfortable for both of us. Almost 10 days after Jason's arrival, Woody and I were in for a surprise. Caitlin had met with Amanda to update her on how things were progressing with Jason. According to Amanda, things were going far better than she had expected. After talking for about an hour, Woody's daughter calmly asked Amanda if she could help her get some birth control pills. It was something Mrs. Freese hadn't anticipated. Without thinking, Amanda agreed. After Caitlin left with a smile, Amanda began having second thoughts. That's when Woody and I got involved. Amanda had no issue with doing what Caitlin requested, but she wouldn't move forward without Woody's approval. This was the kind of thing no father should have to deal with. Mothers, after all, were meant to handle situations like this. Amanda and I did our best to ease Woody's concerns about the request, and after some hesitation, he finally agreed that it was the right thing to do. It turned out Caitlin had done a much better job with Jason than we'd initially thought. The next morning, I got an unexpected call from Loretta. "John, I need a bit of help. When I signed the divorce papers, I didn't ask for any money, you know that." "Yeah, I know." "Well, I'm in a bit of a tight spot right now, and I was wondering if you could lend me a few $1,000s to get by." It was clear that something had gone wrong for my soon-to-be ex-wife. "I don't understand. I thought you had plenty of money." "What do you mean, John?" "I didn't take any from you or our accounts." "No, I was talking about your father's insurance. There should have been enough there to last you a long time." There was a pause. "John, did you know about the insurance?" "Of course. I'm not that clueless. What happened to all the money from the money market account?" "Oh God, John. I made a terrible, terrible mistake." "How bad, Loretta?" "Raymond and I opened a joint bank account with the cashier's check I got from the credit union." "Let me guess. Raymond's disappeared and the account is empty." Yes, and I don't know what to do. John, I need your help." "Are you going to go after him to get it back?" "What do you mean?" "Where would I even go? I have no idea where he is, or where he might be headed. My guess is he's on his way to Colorado Springs to his wife and kids." There was a long silence. "He's married?" "Yes, and he has 2 kids." "Why didn't you tell me? If you knew this, you should have told me, John." "I'm sorry, darling. I got the impression that you wanted me to stay out of your life." I could tell she was crying now. It was time to stop the suffering. "Loretta, go see Seymour tomorrow. I'll call him and tell him to give you $5,000. That should help for a while, at least until you can get to Colorado and find an attorney." "John? Yes? Thank you." That was the last time I ever had any contact with Loretta. I suppose a lot of guys would think I shouldn't have given her anything. Initially, I felt the same way. She messed up so badly that I couldn't help but feel a little sorry for her. It had been over a month since Jason visited the lodge. Soon he'd be leaving. Caitlin had spent all her time with him, avoiding Woody and me. We started joking about it, almost like she was preparing him for an initiation into our group. Though we all had a quick introduction, none of us, except Caitlin, had really spent any time with him. There was a small library or reading room at one end of the main hall. One afternoon, Woody and I noticed Caitlin and Jason were in there with Amanda Freese. It didn't look like a casual gathering. It seemed more like a formal meeting. Caitlin and Jason were dressed up, which wasn't their usual style. Amanda spotted us watching and gave us a slight smile. After about an hour, the kids came over to us, both grinning from ear to ear. "Your turn now, Daddy. Mrs. Freese wants to talk to you and Uncle John." Woody and I went in like a couple of kids being sent to the principal's office. It turned out Amanda Freese had more money than we ever imagined. We knew she was wealthy, but we had no idea she was that rich. Her father had donated a large sum to his alma mater, Princeton, enough that Amanda could get practically anything she wanted from them. Now all that was left was for Elwood F. Perry to approve his daughter starting at Princeton in less than 2 weeks. As far as Woody was concerned, it was an easy decision. Later, Terry joined us on the porch. It was too cold for beer, but we drank it anyway. We were trying to figure out if Caitlin really liked Jason, or if she was just pretending to score a free ride to college. We didn't dwell on it for long. Terry still hadn't opened up about Dora, and Woody and I both knew that was a subject that would never be discussed. Later that evening, Amanda joined me by the fireplace with the antique popcorn popper. While popcorn tasted better in the microwave, it was more fun making it in the fireplace. I kind of liked the burnt, crispy kernels. I never really thought of wine as something to drink with popcorn, but tonight felt special. It was the first night in a long time that I didn't sleep alone. We thought we had been discreet, but forgot that Caitlin was the one who made the beds in the morning. Amanda's untouched bed didn't go unnoticed. At breakfast, Amanda and I endured Caitlin's teasing. Later that morning, Amanda moved her things into my room. Jason, who was usually quiet and reserved, gave me a knowing wink at lunch. I took it as a sign that I had his approval. WeatherGuard Recovery Enterprises agreed to repair the damaged house for $14,000 plus 5% of the resale profit. They specialized in restoring storm and fire-damaged properties. The entire agreement was handled online. I never saw the old house again, but ended up with over $60,000 in profit. Sarah called to inform me that her mother had successfully recovered almost all the money Raymond had taken from her. Loretta had left Colorado and moved to Los Angeles, where she planned to stay with a cousin. Amanda went with Jason and Caitlin to help them settle in at school. They had spent the last 2 weeks at the lodge sharing a cabin, so Woody had no issues letting them share a condo while attending school. He understood that trying to do anything else would just cause him unnecessary frustration. Before Amanda returned, she stopped by her home in Burlington to pack up clothes and personal items she'd need at the lodge. Her decision to stay with us full-time was welcomed by everyone, especially Dora, who was craving some female companionship. Amanda took over the advertising and correspondence, tasks I had always handled but never really enjoyed. Much to Luke's disappointment, Amanda gave up pike fishing. Her obsession seemed to have passed. As fall wound down, things slowed since we were one of the few places in the area that didn't cater to hunters. This gave us time to catch up on chores and tidy things up. Money wasn't an issue. We had a small Christmas party with a tree and some presents. Amanda hung mistletoe, and Dora was overjoyed when she got her first kiss from her husband. That seemed to smooth things out between them. Woody, unfortunately, was the only one who spent the holidays alone, but he didn't seem to mind too much. He never heard from Colleen again. Although my divorce was finalized, Amanda and I never talked about marriage. Things were good as they were, and neither of us wanted to mess that up. Jason and Caitlin didn't complete their first year at Princeton. After a quick marriage in Maryland, Jason transferred to the University of Vermont, and the two lovebirds moved into the Burlington family home. Amanda was thrilled about her first grandchild. Apparently, the birth control pills hadn't worked. It might have been a bit reckless, but it was a wild ride and a lot of fun. I'd do it all over again.